On today's show, I talk with Jeff Byers, CEO and co-founder of Momentous and retired NFL athlete. Jeff shares his thoughts on working with experts to bring a vision to fruition, resilience as a leader, and how he's learned to navigate the challenges that being a high performer on the field can sometimes cause when the same approach does not work in business leadership. I'm Julie B., and you're playing the game of leadership. Hey there, I'm Julie B., and this is the Game of Leadership. On this show, I interview athletes who have become entrepreneurs and business leaders about how their experiences as an athlete have elevated their leadership in business. Today, I'm so excited to welcome Jeff Byers to the show. He's the CEO and co-founder of Momentous, a wellness company for high-performance seekers at all levels. Before his career as an entrepreneur, Jeff attended the University of Southern California, where he was a two-time captain and multiple-year starter for the USC championship football team. He went on to have a career in the NFL, mostly with the Carolina Panthers. I'm so looking forward to this conversation today because I know we're going to learn a lot about the game of leadership. So Jeff, welcome to the show. I'm so glad to have you, and thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me as well, Julie. Super excited.
Yeah, so Jeff, tell us about Momentous. I checked out the website. You guys just have it's great energy, just a great vibe, but I want to hear it from the co-founder. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, Momentous is incredibly special, obviously, to me, but really the vision of what started almost 5 years ago was how do we build a leading high performance company and do it very differently than it's ever been done before. That's a Pete Carroll quote, by the way, that I've really embodied.
Yeah.
But really our vision is to how do we democratize high performance, right? To democratize high performance, we believe we do that through products, education, guidance, and knowledge. And what we've been able to do is really bring what is absolutely cutting edge and who are the experts and how do we democratize that down to the consumer and others that normally don't have that amount of information, but also align that with the right products, et cetera. It's been a really, really awesome journey. And it's been one of those things of like, being at the forefront of high performance is so broad and people didn't get that. It meant something to me 5 years ago, and sticking very true to how do we operate and who do we work with and why do we work with those people and how that's actually created this really massive brand, but also instilled so much trust with experts, scientists, practitioners, and allowed us to work with almost every professional and college team to work with the government, the Department of Defense, win innovation contracts and have some of the biggest names in the, what I call the life optimization space as partners in this business. It's been really, really fun. Our main, how we monetize our business is we are a sports nutrition supplement company, but really I like to say we're the anti that. We're trying to break the mold and really how do we bring guidance, knowledge, and education in around our experts, around our practitioners, and not be behind a magic grape, because truly what we're trying to do is optimize a human, and what happens in pro and elite sports and elite performers is very, very different than what happens in the consumer space. And that's one of the things I learned as an athlete is actually what you're doing in the locker room is not rocket science and not that hard, right? But how do you translate that is a very, very different piece of this. And so I thought, well, we have a really innovative product. We have access. How do we bring all this to life in a meaningful way and actually create change for humans and democratize high performance?
And in that industry, it's great that you had that vision 5 years ago of transparency, education, and recognizing the differences in the consumer space and what you were in your athletic career used to focusing on, because it's so needed. I mean, it's a crowded marketplace out there in that industry, but from everything I've seen and just hearing you talk about it, I can hear, number one, your passion behind it, and number two, you're really approaching it from the perspective of the best interest of the people who are customers of your business and your products.
I think the big thing for me is, right, I'm not an expert. I'm not a scientist. I'm not an expert, right? I am a life optimizer, right? I've been that way for a very, very long time. I tried to optimize around football. I've tried to optimize around a lot of things. I am our core consumer, right? When I think about it. And what did I always do when I was playing? What do really high level athletes or right achievers of any
Mm-hmm.
right performers of any
Mm-hmm.
type do. They go find the experts, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't just like go take it by chance,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like we go and like the NFL puts a team of people around you, like the best in the world,
Mm-hmm.
dietitians, strength coaches, right? Data analytics, right? To really optimize you. But in the consumer space, it's like, oh, here's just something from off the shelf. And that's totally good, but that's not how it works
Mm-hmm.
in the elite space. And so I was like, why wouldn't we just leverage experts? Why don't we build a company around smart people, not try to be the smart people,
Yeah.
right? Because the smart people are in academia. They're working for the Carolina Panthers,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're working in these organizations.
Yeah.
They're not building companies, experts in high performance and optimization and clinical research and supplementation are not in businesses,
Mm-hmm.
right? What I want to do is create an ecosystem to bring them to bear,
Yeah.
right? Help them develop product formulation. How should we position this, right? What ingredients should we pick and why? How strong is the clinical research? Do we need to do more clinical research?
Mm-hmm.
Where are the innovations? Because that's not like, I'm not that person,
Yeah.
right? I love it and I'm passionate about it, but I want to fill it with the experts, and the experts not one person; it's a whole community of them.
And that lesson applies to business ownership, leadership. I mean, when you have to know enough to know that you don't know the answer, and be willing to go out and get the expert advice when you need it. And I think that's a very important business lesson just across the board for business owners listening, for sure. So, Jeff, what is your favorite part about being a business owner, about being the CEO and co-founder?
Oh man, it's the closest thing I've got to being an elite athlete, right? When I think about commitment, the stress, the pressure,
Mm-hmm.
right, the resiliency required, um, is very similar to elite athletics. Like it,
Mm-hmm.
what I loved about pro sports and college for that matter is there is a level of expectation of performance,
Mm-hmm.
right? And there are so many things, so many variables out there, but very few that you can control. But resiliency in sports, if you're a musician, if you're an actor, or if
Mm-hmm.
you own or you're not entrepreneur, whatever it may be, is like the core underlying factor that
Mm-hmm.
drives success.
Mm-hmm.
And resiliency is really hard, right? Because you get knocked down so much as a business owner. And I like those are the things that I look back and I love. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's not easy, right? As everybody, most people listening know, like if it's easy, you're like in like the 0.0001%.
Yeah.
I've had people like, oh man, it's so easy to raise money. I'm like, who are you?
Who are you?
Like,
Share your secrets with me, please.
yeah,
I
your
will pay you for
secrets.
them.
Yeah. Because it's not because it's challenging, it's hard.
Uh-huh.
And right, if it was easy, everybody would do it too. And like this ride is for a special person.
Yeah.
So I really love that. And I compare it to a football analogy.
Mm-hmm.
It's terrible, but it's there was a coach that always said the ball always gets snapped, right?
Mm-hmm.
Meaning you don't control when the ball gets snapped. You don't control what happened. Like the last play, you might have, like for me as an offensive lineman, might have given up a sack,
Yeah.
right? Or something. It could have been terrible, right? But the ball's going to get snapped again, and you got to go play your best play again.
Yeah.
Or try to.
Yeah.
And that ball gets snapped, you have to make decisions fast,
Mm-hmm.
right? Based upon previous information
Mm-hmm.
and what you think, make some forward-looking predictions of like what's going to happen, like what's the situation, how's it going to be. But then it gets snapped again, and it gets snapped again, and it gets
Mm-hmm.
snapped again. And that's how right being an entrepreneur or business in a fast-paced moving company works. Like you got to be ready to make a decision. You got to be able to really like all of the experience you've had, you got to think about it, but you can't let it weigh on you because maybe yesterday was terrible.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter, right? You got to perform today, this next one. So this ball always gets snapped for me is like, there's always another snap. There's always another snap until there's not. And you got to fight to get another snap. Whether you got beat, you scored a touchdown, whatever that may be, there's another time and another time and another time.
There's always
and
an opportunity to improve, to do it a little bit better or a lot better. Like, and that mentality, that's resilience. Like, you might get kicked in the teeth, but you're going to get up and take another snap. And you might get kicked in the teeth again, hopefully not, but you're going to keep doing that, and that's how you get better. I mean, that is how you keep going and you get better as a business owner, as a high performance athlete, all of those things. It's such a critical skill.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is.
So I feel like you just, one of my questions is usually about how being a high achiever or high performer helps you in business. And I feel like you just answered that. So I want to ask you kind of the opposite question. Have you had the experience where being a high achiever, high performer, whatever you want to call it, have you seen that? Have you felt like that's kind of hurt your performance as a business owner or a leader ever? Or do you have any situations where that comes to mind?
Right. Like for all the benefits it has, right, it also has a lot of negatives, right?
Mm-hmm.
And people, right, and how you think about team and people are very,
Mm-hmm.
very different.
Mm-hmm.
And I've learned that a lot. Like I will say some of the areas I've struggled at the most are around team and people. And it's like, well, why? Like you were two-time captain of SC's football team and
Yeah.
like all these things. It's because when you're on a pro football team, you have very few people that can actually get there, and it's like
Yeah.
self-selected out. But in a business you need all shapes and sizes of people, right, in terms of like skill set level, etc. Like you
Mm-hmm.
need the right, you need the 23-year-old that's a pee-wee football player in business, right, and then you need some, all pro potential hall of famers
Mm-hmm.
as well. Like you need this huge level, and it's a very different mentality. But also, so I'll say like those people skills are challenging, and the expectations you set. And as a really high achiever, right? Like it's winning and it's directness and it's all of like all the things that make you special also
Mm-hmm.
make it very hard, make it very hard to work for,
Yeah.
right, and
Yeah.
make it very hard to be open and direct to a leader. And so I would say like, how do you create, in business, like how do you set up those boundaries, right, and be very upfront, like this is my style, this is who I am, right, and you got to give people the choice to opt in or opt out, and you got to make moves on people too, right, and
Mm-hmm.
I've not always moved as fast as I wanted to, or made decisions that weren't solely mine, right, have been influenced by others. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's just like, you got to be true to who you are, and people leadership is incredibly hard. And honestly, like it was easy to be a part of like, right, on a pro football team,
Mm-hmm.
because you knew that this person sitting next to you, right, they were incredibly talented and motivated.
Yeah.
They'd been through a very similar journey as you,
Mm-hmm.
and they know the stakes and they know how high those stakes are. And you can look them in the eye and tell them that wasn't good enough.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and be very direct, right? And you'll have a coach that will be like, you will not be here tomorrow if you don't play better,
Yeah.
right? And that is something that doesn't translate into the real
No.
world, that I've learned.
No.
Even if you want to say those things, and there are some companies that have worked and thrived under that, but at the end of the day, like you can't build a team. You can't build a company. You can build a leadership around that directness,
Mm-hmm.
right? A leadership team
Mm-hmm.
around you,
Mm-hmm.
right? But it takes a very special group of people,
Mm-hmm.
right, to have that sort of directness and accountability and be like, this wasn't good enough, this was great. And for them to be like, they're not attacking me, they're
Mm-hmm.
saying we need to be better,
Uh-huh.
right? So anyways,
It's
I'd say that that's my big learning of like being a high performer. It's incredibly intimidating
it is.
to a lot of people.
It is. And I think what you were talking about there with being direct, and when you're playing sports, when you're on a team, your teammates, they want that feedback from you, especially at the level you did it. They are. I mean, as long as you're probably doing your job well, and if you're seen as a leader on the team, they will openly take that because they know that's something that they can take and get better at. And then you also have the coaches there to back you up. But when you are leading a team of people who aren't, they may be high achievers in other ways, but when they haven't done it at that level, and you are the one, you don't necessarily have the coach there also backing that up, you're the one that has to deliver that. Sometimes you have to temper it a little bit, and know the people who are working for you too, like know how they hear feedback, and have those soft skills are sometimes hard to come by for people who are at the level that you've gotten to, for sure.
I think one of the big things, and I've really started to embrace this, and I have like an executive coach that works with myself and my co-founder and the team.
Mm-hmm.
But why is athletics or like consulting or things like that, why there's a set way of communication, right? That it's
Mm-hmm.
super standard and you grow up in that.
Mm-hmm.
And so you know how to communicate with each other and there's an expectation.
Mm-hmm.
In business, there's not always that expectation. And one of the things that I've learned and right, and really starting to embrace like, what's called conscious leadership or the 15 commitments to conscious leadership, et cetera. But what I'm learning that does is it creates a way to communicate,
Mm-hmm.
right, with people in a company and communicate in a culture so you can have direct feedback, right, and be able to share the right things. And so I think, to go back, like, what's been the biggest challenge or struggle is,
Mm-hmm.
right, when you grow up in sports, or like if you're at McKinsey and Company, for
Mm-hmm.
example, like you grow up in a way and there's a way to communicate in a very, very clear way, and that is known,
Mm-hmm.
right? And right, people at those places are incredibly high performers, but
Yeah.
they've got there a certain way. In business, how do you create a common language within your company to be able to share direct feedback, right? To be able to be vulnerable, because you're incredibly vulnerable in a locker room. Like people
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, you're super tough. Like you're getting called out, you're getting cursed at, right? Like you can get cut the next day. Guys come in and out. Like that is a really vulnerable place
Mm-hmm.
where there's real fear and there's real anxiety, right? How do you create an environment to be able to communicate that within a company?
Yeah.
And I think, like one of the things we're really starting to embrace as a business is this conscious leadership. And for me, right, what I'm now starting to pick up from it, it's like this language of how do we communicate? Like, how do we share a common communication path? And like as elite performers, like it seems really clear, but it's not for everybody else. And so how do you instill and create the right framework to be able to do that?
Hey, this is Julie B, and thanks for watching The Game of Leadership. I'm here with Jeff Byers, the CEO and co-founder of Momentous, and he's just given us a masterclass in leadership communication. But Jeff, I do want to ask you, kind of switching gears here. I know you've had a lot of wins at Momentous, but I would love to hear your story about what you feel is the biggest win thus far for your company.
Oh man.
Biggest win.
Yeah, right. Like you sent me this as like or somebody sending me this as like, hey, be ready to talk about this. And I thought about it. Um, and I don't like, there's not one that I can look back on. I think the biggest win, right, for me is just staying really true to this, what I now call the flywheel of high performance, of like being at the forefront of high performance and staying true to that and not letting people bump us off too much of it. Like there are so many external things. I mean, there's so many wins that we've had, but every win relates to another win, right? Like we have this really incredible partnership with a gentleman by the name of Dr. Andrew Huberman. He's a neuroscientist at Stanford, but he's also like the top podcaster and like the top expert in life optimization,
Yeah.
right, in the world right now.
Mm-hmm.
But we wouldn't have got him if we didn't win 10 contracts with the federal government. And we wouldn't have done that if we didn't have this. And like they all kind of like, what is super core to like our differentiation? It's like this unwavering commitment to be leaders in high performance, right? And to do it very differently. And so to me, that's my win of like staying true to that, even when it was really, really hard. And it's like, man, economics are tough.
Yeah.
Are we raising money? COVID, like it's always that, like, stay true. Why are we here? What are we doing? Why are we here? Like, and just continuing to bring it back to that.
What's been the hardest no for you to hear thus far in business?
Oh, you get said no so many times.
Is there like a general theme to what have been the hardest no's thus far?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think for me, the hardest no's are when, like part of, right, I think being in my seat and as your listeners, like you have to have a lot of intuition, right? And you're like, like you might be talking about making a decision here, but you in your mind already have it 20 times ahead. You're like, if I do X, Y, and Z, I think this is going to happen, like probably, which is going to snowball that. Like lots of, and what I've found around like entrepreneurs and business leaders is that intuition that lives. And it's like, for me, they just, I've seen the story play out, and like I have good like the no, that's not going to happen is really hard, right? And I think early on in business, you're able to just like early on as an early stage company, you're just like, you follow your own intuition,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you don't always have to justify it, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
But as you grow up as a company,
Mm-hmm.
right? A board of directors isn't like, oh yeah, you do X and then Z happens,
Yeah.
or you do A
You
and
do
then Z
A and the
happens.
Z happened. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Uh-huh.
And that for me has been a right, like how do you string together your intuition, because you get said no when you're like, oh yeah, we're gonna
Yeah.
sign this partner or do this, and it's like no, and you're like, what? It's so obvious,
Mm-hmm.
right? But it's
Can't you
not
see it?
obvious to everybody.
Can't you see it
Yeah.
like I see it? This is
um
what's going to happen, but
so
they can't see it.
so
Yeah, I get
kind of a
that.
no, kind of not a no.
Mm-hmm.
There I mean, there's so many people that said no over the years. Like, I don't know, I pitched thousands of people for
Mm-hmm.
money. Like there's a lot of people that didn't believe
Mm-hmm.
in everything,
Yeah.
and right, like, but that's just part of it. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
So just tying it into my life a little bit. You're currently on a show that multiple people said no, it's not going to work to me too. So that's just to give you a little. And I was just like, I'm fortunately in a position where I can say we're doing it. Like I heard your feedback, I respect it. I feel very passionately about this connection between sports, leadership, and business. So the show's happening, and here we are. So I think that's fun. We've talked so much about team, and I know you're kind of passed from. I believe the championship teams you played on at USC were was that the Reggie Bush, Matt Leinart era, or
there's a pretty good run there
yeah,
of really incredible people.
yeah,
Yeah. So my freshman year was the Reggie
yeah,
Lendell craziness,
yeah.
national championship team. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it was incredible time. And honestly, like Pete Carroll as a leader and like a developer of humans
Mm-hmm.
is, quite inspirational
Mm-hmm.
when I think about it and like what he's done, and just thinking about his power and his superpower is
Mm-hmm.
really quite incredible.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel very lucky to have grown up and actually got to spend a ton of time with him as a captain
Mm-hmm.
for 2 years, and like really influential in my life. Like when I think like, all right, beyond my direct family, who was probably one of the most influential
Yeah,
people when I think about what I'm doing now, it's Pete.
yeah.
And I think Pete, his style and what he's able to do, he could have done a lot of different things in life.
Mm-hmm.
Football is what he does, but like he's just a leader of humans.
Mm-hmm.
And his energy, like, right, like I hope when I'm Pete's age that I have that energy, right? Like I'm going to, right?
Yeah.
Because he brings so much passion and love because he loves what he does.
Mm-hmm.
And that's for me is like, how do I make sure I'm always doing and always aligned and finding the joy and love in the things that I'm doing? Because if not, then why are you doing them? So
Exactly. So, what are some of the things that either in business or sports, that you, as part of a team, that you've been like the most proud of for your team as a whole, that you've seen them achieve? That maybe you even just played maybe more of a background role. Is there anything that stands out in terms of being proud of your team?
yeah, I mean, my team, we've essentially like 5x the business in a really short period of time,
Mm-hmm.
and we've done that with a very small team.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm incredibly proud that the team has been able to do a lot with a little,
Mm-hmm.
and just be able to execute on that. I would also say just like being a business owner over the last 5 years has been really challenging. Like there's been, I mean, it always is. Like COVID was
Yeah,
insane,
maybe. I don't know.
right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And like people leaning in during
Mm-hmm.
COVID
Mm-hmm.
was pretty impactful for us, and like that to me, like that is really special. So I'm very thankful for. But I'm just thankful for people that have entrusted, and
Mm-hmm.
there are some people that you know on the team that right
Mm-hmm.
didn't matter what the company was, right? I could go do something else. They just bet on me,
They bet on
right? And
you.
they believe in me, and that trust is incredibly impactful. And not the whole, and that's not a requirement
Mm-hmm.
ever, and will
Yeah.
never be. But the people who are just like, you know,
They see the
That
vision that you
is,
see, or they trust
yeah,
you to get you to the vision that you see, even if they don't see it.
yeah.
There's an element to that for sure. Hey, this is Julie B, and you're watching the Game of Leadership. I'm here with Jeff Byers. We're just having a fantastic conversation. Jeff, so much of what you said is really resonating with me, and I'm sure it's going to resonate with those who are watch the show. One thing I love to ask people in your position is, first question is, how do you define success today? And then this two-part question, the second part of that is, how is that different how is that different than it was when you were playing football?
I think that it's a really hard one. Like in sport, you know what a success, you know when you
Mm-hmm.
are successful or not. You know, like there's a win and a loss.
Yeah.
There is like, you know, every play, every snap, every practice, etc. In business, it's not that, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, you know, days are like snaps,
Mm-hmm.
weeks are like practices, right? Months are like like in a year is a game, right?
Yeah.
Like, and you just got to string more together. And so I think in sports, a win and a loss is very clear. It's black or white. In
Mm-hmm.
business, it's not like that. And you don't always win as much as you lose, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like in business, like you got to have it's accumulation of wins, very differently than it's very different than sports. And so like, what do I see as a win, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, for me, right, like I have a deep fiduciary duty to my business is how do you right preserve and maximize value,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm very passion driven. Like we have to democratize change and really change the lives of humans. Like we have the opportunity to do something very special,
Mm-hmm.
right? Whether it's the men and women who serve our country in the military, or it's with just the consumer trying to be a better human to live longer, et cetera. Like we have the opportunity to influence that. And that is incredibly impactful to me. And so a win is continuing to stay true to that mission
Mm-hmm.
while creating real shareholder value,
Mm-hmm.
as a, for-profit business that has a lot of shareholders now.
Mm-hmm. Mm. And that's there's a balance there for sure.
It's
Anybody
hard.
who's had a fiduciary duty in their business, as well as having all those considerations, there's such a balance to all of that that you have to manage. Jeff, what legacy do you hope to leave?
It's a great question. I really hope to leave a legacy of innovation, science back and science backed knowledge. Like when people go back and whatever happens to Momentous over the next 5-10 years, who knows,
Mm-hmm.
right? I don't know, but people go back is like Momentous was part of this change in society. When we think about health optimization, they brought and changed the dynamic of that. They brought knowledge to bear. They bought really quality products and led the way. Like I would love that to be a legacy, right? Like we help change the environment because in 10 years, right? I don't
Mm-hmm.
know what happens. Does Unilever buy us and take us to Walmart? Don't know. Don't care.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's not where I am today. And for me, it's that, but also like I do have this really deep, like my inner why of like why be a founder beyond like what I love is like I believe that that's all of our calling to change and leave this world a better place. And I
Mm-hmm.
feel like I have a really incredible opportunity to do that. I was able to do that through sports by
Yeah.
giving back, showing your time, your energy, right? Like going, talking to kids at elementary schools and donate and working with, the USO to help brighten, the men and women who serve our countries. Like we all have unique platforms to
Mm-hmm.
change the world or make the world a better place. And I feel I have a very deep obligation. Have great role models in my life that have done that. And I believe Momentous is a way to do that. Momentous is a way also to create financial security to be able to do more and more of that. To me, right, that is really, really important is to leave this world a better place, inspire change in others
Mm-hmm.
and motivate them to do the same.
And that's so great, and it's one of those things where leaving the world a better place is one you hear frequently, but you have a very clear vehicle in which to do that with, and a vision and how to do that. And you're obviously executing on that too. And I know you're just getting started in it, really. But I just see that you're going to continue to execute and fulfill that legacy. So that's great, Jeff. Man, this conversation's been great. But it is time to start wrapping up. So I have one other question for you. What leadership skill or trait did you learn as an athlete that you think has helped you the most as a leader in business?
Yeah, I mean, we'll go back to what we talked about early on. It's resiliency, right? Like that leadership trait is core to sports, right? Is resiliency, resiliency, resiliency.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not, right? Like leadership is really hard and it can be super lonely, and sports is the same way. Right. And that resiliency is so critical to success long-term in life. And it's like, maybe it's not a true leadership quality or trait, but I believe it is, like, because not everything goes your way, and it's really hard sometimes, but you got to be resilient and you got to find the glass half full, right? Nothing ever goes as planned, nothing. And there's a lot of really great things that you might want, but you're not always right. As an athlete, like you sometimes got to do what's best for the team. You sometimes got to do what's best for the business too. Yeah. And I think that's a really hard thing. Like that resiliency, that grit that it takes is such a core thing, because it gets hard. And when it gets hard, if you don't have it, you just walk away, and therefore you have nothing special.
Yeah.
And I think, that's what separates business leaders, business owners, and entrepreneurs from others, is that
there's an element there of being willing to do what's best for the most, even if it's not necessarily in your personal best interest. So what's best for your team, what's best for your business, what's best for your company. Sometimes you have to be able to hear no and be resilient, knowing that the experts that you have around you are saying, we hear what you want to do, but no, it's not the best thing for the team, so we're going to do this. And being able to get on board with that other thing and move forward with it, and just being resilient to get up and keep there was so much that you just said. So, well, Jeff, listen, I have so enjoyed this conversation today. Thank you for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, Julie.
And that is it for today's show, but please stay tuned, because I'll be back soon with more conversations and leadership lessons from athletes turned entrepreneurs. I'm Julie B., and thank you for playing the game of leadership.